What's up, everybody? It's really cold this morning. At least for me, it is. I wanted to talk about the debate that took place on the Joe Rogan podcast between Joel Kahn and Kresser. Now, the points argued in the debate were essentially this. Joel Kahn was using the old trusty rusty technique of arguing against saturated fat and cholesterol, and thereby, because both of those are plentiful in meat, looking to debunk meat. And as a healthful part of any diet, obviously. And Kresser was arguing that there is a place for meat and animal products in general in any healthful diet. Now, these sort of debates could only really be considered worthwhile in a dumbed down, retarded, ignorant, indoctrinated society full of fucking zombies. This is why I don't engage in nutritional debates. This is why I look for the simplest, most common fucking sense ways of debunking veganism as a nutritionally viable diet. It's not. There's no need to get into all these studies and all this bullshit. You just debunk it for what it is. Nutritionally deficient. Simple. Anyway, the only reason why a society could hold these debates that consider meat, because this is what this was essentially about, that still have to the only reason why a human society would consider meat as not healthful is because people are fucking morons and they don't have any goddamn fucking common sense. Not everybody, just the majority. And they're brainwashed, indoctrinated, you know the rest. Look, meat is a tried and true food source of, and animal products in general, of any human society on this planet. We've been eating meat for at least 2.5 million years, if you believe that we evolved from monkeys. And believe it is, then we've been eating meat for a lot longer than that, okay? If you believe we're related to fucking chimps or any of these other great apes, they all eat meat. They all eat animal products, all of them. Meat has been a part of our ancestral diet as far back as you can go, essentially. Now, yes, so have plants. However, not all plants. Meat is meat is meat is meat is meat, right? Fish, okay, a little different, but ruminant meat is ruminant meat. It's all very much similar, if not the same, as far as nutritional content goes. So even though, yeah, we've been eating plants for a long time, not all populations have been eating all types of plants, which are very different chemically. This really only started happening for the most advanced societies maybe 100 years ago. For the second world, maybe, I'm just guessing here, 30 years ago. And for the third world, this is really, really, really recent. And it happened maybe 15 years ago. It started happening where they started eating foods essentially imported from all over the place. So Plants, by and large, are very new food. Meat, by and large, has been eaten for millions of years by human beings. So to say that meat is bad for us is essentially like saying grass is bad for cattle. And that's bad shit crazy. If you even entertain this idea, you got serious fucking issues. So these debates are to somebody who's woke, who's fucking aware of how this shit works and is a logical person. These sort of debates are useless, but they help to analyzing these people in these debates and looking at what they say. They help you understand why people are so fucking confused, and supposedly the most intelligent species on the planet that has no fucking clue what it should be eating. Oh, what a bunch of fucking clowns, human beings, man. I was drinking out of jars before it was cool to drink out of mason jars, and I don't need a fucking mason jar to be able to drink out of one. Fucking hipsters. Sorry about all the swearing this morning, but like I said, it is kind of cold. Maybe I'm a little bit cranky because I had to wake up at 5, but anyway. Dr. Joel Kahn is a doctor who prescribes statins. And for those of you who don't know what statins are, they're cholesterol-lowering drugs. So at least some portion of his income comes from selling drugs to people that lower cholesterol. So he is financially dependent on the lipid heart hypothesis and the diet heart hypothesis and the lipid hypothesis, right? He has to basically push this old science in order to sell his new drugs. Just what it is. He's financially invested in this shit. He also has 4 vegan restaurants. He's financially invested in veganism. Of course he's going to defend it to the death. He's financially motivated to paint cholesterol and meat in general as bad. It is what it is. You got to understand that. Moreover, and I don't know about Chris Kresser's business ventures because he didn't care to talk about that stuff. So I'm going to assume he's just in it for health reasons. I'm not saying he doesn't make money. Maybe he sells supplements. I don't know. He's not my role model. I'm not following his dietary advice. That's for sure. But anyway, another thing about Khan is that he's kind of a fast-talking slickster. You know, he wanted to crack jokes and bullshit around a little bit. He didn't seem all that serious to me. Chris Kresser, on the other hand, was very serious and about that business. So that's just something I noticed. And another thing that he wanted us to know, for those of you in the know, is that Dr. Kahn, he himself wanted us to know this, is a good Jewish boy. For those of you who know, you know. For those of you who don't, race card you will pull right now. And to that I say, anyway, debate. This whole 4 hours could have been condensed into maybe an hour. But Dr. Joel Kahn didn't have any arguments. He didn't have any credible arguments. As I'm sure all of you already know, he was pulling 40, 50, 60, 80-year-old studies. Not to say he didn't have any modern science, but very few and far between studies. You know, he while Chris Kresser was providing meta-analyses and all the up-to-date studies, you know, that have debunked all these old studies, new research with obviously new, better methods and based on knowledge gleaned from old studies, you know, the mistakes from the past, so on and so forth. So the science that he was providing, if indeed it does exist and he wasn't just pulling it out of his ass, and you could go apparently on his website and check that it is credible. Well, clearly, not only was he providing more up-to-date science, he was providing new science that debunked the old science. So there's nothing more to say about that. Another thing that was very annoying was that Kahn wanted to paint epidemiology as some kind of holy grail of science, calling it, saying that it proves hypotheses when that's just not true. So he's a liar. Epidemiological studies, not only are they laughable, they're only really there to generate hypotheses, as Chris Kresser pointed out, right? And Kahn wanted to paint this false dichotomy as if Chris Kresser was completely, as if you could only completely discount epidemiology or be completely excited about it and use it as the most credible, you know, science out there, or very credible at the very least, right? Not the most credible. So he was painting this false dichotomy when Chris Kresser's, and strawmanning Chris Kresser, because that wasn't his argument. His argument was, look, epidemiology can be useful in a certain context so long as we are rational and reserved about how we treat these results. And we actually look into each and individual study. And because not even all epidemiological studies are created equal either. You have to look at what they account for, what they try to control for, even though that's not really possible with epidemiology simply because of the method, the number one method with those studies being food questionnaires, you know, a very flawed tool, as Chris Kresser pointed out. But he wasn't saying that we should throw all this data out. He was just saying, well, let's not put all our eggs in one basket and let's not hype it up more than what it is. That's all he was saying, whereas Kahn was trying to misrepresent his position and he was painting this false dichotomy and lying, very important to know this, about epidemiology being there to prove hypotheses. This is fucking ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. He's a complete fucking clown for saying this shit. He's a complete fucking clown for saying that eating fish will give you diabetes. You know, that type of vegan doctrine, dogma nonsense. So whenever Kahn provided a study, right, Kresser had something to say about it. He was familiar with the study generally, and he was able to say, well, these are the problems with the study. Whenever, generally speaking, Chris Kresser was providing new research, Kahn couldn't answer it. And for those of you who said Joe Rogan was biased, he wasn't biased. Biased means unfair. How was he being unfair to the guy who didn't have any answers and was beating around the fucking bush, deflecting, trying to talk about something else? How was he being unfair to him when he was asking him to answer the question, address these studies? But he couldn't address these studies because he never read the studies. He wasn't familiar with the studies because all he's interested in is studies that support his lifestyle, support his sources of income. That's all he's interested in. He's not going to look into something that could potentially put him out on the street. I exaggerate, but you get the point. The science, the new science that's coming out and is debunking veganism, is debunking this assertion that meat is not healthful. Why would he be interested in any of that? Right? He is deeply invested in ancient science, basically, something that I called a conscious omnivore on in one of our debates back a few months ago. So it was clear that Kahn wasn't familiar with the new studies that debunk his lifestyle and sources of income, basically. So he couldn't address them. So all he did, basically, is commit a fallacy, appealing to authority. That's all he did. The entire debate, basically. He said, well, this organization says, well, this guy got a Nobel Prize. You know, the belief is, the consensus is, most blah, blah, blah say this and that, this and that. He was appealing to authority, and he was appealing to popularity, which are complete and utter fucking fallacies, logical fallacies. It doesn't matter what people say. What matters is the truth, obviously. And he's a liar. He's not interested in the truth. He's interested in pushing his worldview because, once again, his financial well-being depends on it. So that was essentially the debate in a nutshell. One guy came prepared. He came with the studies. He knew the opposition's side. He knew their views, and he was prepared to discuss that. The other guy was just there to push fallacies, push old science, and push dogma, and had no idea what the opposition's counterpoints were, and he wasn't able to address them. And that's essentially the debate in a nutshell.